After I placed $6 million in an irrevocable trust for my children, my wife confessed something that dismantled my entire existence. My son looked me dead in the eye and said, "We've known for 6 years." The document on that conference table was labeled Plaintiff's Exhibit Baoa, a screenshot of a text message from October of 2019. My attorney slid it across the polished mahogany. 22nd floor, downtown Chicago, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the river. The kind of room where empires are built and families are quietly dismantled. My son had written to my daughter at 11:47 on a Tuesday night. 6 years ago. He'll never find out. Just let him sign whatever he wants to sign. My son was 34 years old at that table. He read his own words, and then he stared at the wall behind my head like the drywall had suddenly become fascinating. His mother's attorney requested a 10-minute recess. That was a Thursday in November. 8 months earlier, I had signed $6.2 million into a trust for 3 children. I cried in my truck in the parking garage afterward, not because I was sad, because I was so goddamn happy I couldn't breathe. Before I take you back to the beginning, answer me this, and I need you to be honest. Is there anything your family could keep from you that you could never forgive? Stay with me. Because what I discovered that spring, I discovered in the wrong order. And by the time the truth finally surfaced, the people I loved most had already spent 6 years burying it. My name is Nathan Ashford. Everybody calls me Nate. I'm 62 years old, born and raised in the industrial south side of Chicago. I started as an apprentice pipe fitter with Local 597, 3 months after my 19th birthday. I've still got the scar. Left forearm, 4 inches. From a cutting torch that slipped on a high-rise job in the winter of '86. My kids used to trace it with their little fingers when they were small. I'd tell them that's where the money came from. I ran crews for 11 years. Then in 1997, I started my own mechanical contracting outfit out of a rented warehouse in the south suburbs. 2 trucks, 1 phone. I answered every call myself. Ashford Mechanical, commercial and industrial HVAC, process piping, the unglamorous infrastructure that keeps America running. 26 years later, I had 230 employees, and last year I sold the company for more money than my father ever saw in his lifetime. Nobody handed me anything. I welded that empire together 1 bead at a time, with my own 2 hands. But I need you to understand what that number cost. Because the dollar amount doesn't mean anything until you know what it's made of. There were 4 years in the early 2000s where I did not take a single paycheck, not a reduced one, none. 0. My wife Andrea worked, and we survived on her income. Every dollar the company generated went back into equipment and payroll. Because when you're small and you miss payroll one time, you're finished. Your best people walk. And they tell everyone exactly why. I'm not going to pretend I was a perfect father. I wasn't. I missed my daughter's middle school graduation for an emergency shutdown at a refinery. I missed countless Saturdays. My son played 2 years of varsity football, and I attended maybe 5 games total. I've thought about those absences more in the last year than I care to admit. But here's what I never missed. Every single first day of school. Every year. I drove those kids myself, in a work truck. I made that rule in '93. And I never broke it once. I'd show up covered in grime and grease. My youngest used to make me park around the block when she hit 8th grade because she was embarrassed. And I did it. But I still came. None of my children ever worked a job in high school. None of them ever carried student loan debt. I built my entire life so they would never have to struggle the way I did. That was the entire purpose of my existence. I didn't have hobbies. I had a mission. March 14th, I signed the trust documents. I'd been planning it for a year. Not a will. A will means waiting until I'm dead. I wanted to watch them benefit while I was still breathing. Irrevocable trust. Funded with $6.2 million, divided equally 3 ways. My son Blake, 34. My daughter Donna, 31. My youngest Maya, 20, sophomore at Northern Illinois University. I signed at an estate law firm in the Loop. A notary and an attorney named Peter explained the word irrevocable to me 4 separate times. Mr. Ashford, once this is executed, you cannot undo it. The assets are no longer yours. That's the point, I told him. I don't want the option to change my mind. I want them to know it's theirs. I bought an expensive bottle of bourbon on the way home, made a toast at dinner, told my children that everything I had was now theirs, that no Ashford would ever have to start where I started. My son said, "That's great, Dad." My daughter was scrolling through her phone. My youngest got up, wrapped her arms around my neck from behind and whispered, "Daddy, you're crazy." Then she laughed into my shoulder. I remember thinking that was the best night of my life. 2 weeks later, my wife destroyed me. Andrea and I were married 34 years. She was a court reporter for years, stopped working around 2010, never went back. Fine by me. By then, the money didn't matter, but the marriage had been going cold for 3 years. I'm not blind. I felt it. It got worse after I sold the company because suddenly I was home all the time. That's something nobody warns you about. For 26 years, I left before sunrise and came back after dark. And it turns out that schedule had been holding something together. When I stopped, the whole structure collapsed. By March, she'd already consulted a divorce attorney. I didn't know that yet. The fight was on a Sunday afternoon, in the kitchen, over something meaningless, a trip to visit her sister in Indianapolis that I didn't want to take. It escalated the way arguments do after 3 decades of resentment. And then she said she wanted a divorce. I said, "Fine." And then I made a mistake. I said something I regret. I told her that after 34 years, at least I could say I gave my children more than my father ever gave me. She went completely still. Then she said, "They're not yours." I said, "What?" "None of them." She was leaning against the kitchen counter, arms crossed, completely calm. That's the detail I'll never forget. She wasn't angry. She wasn't crying. She was serene. "Not one of them, Nathan." And then she smiled. 2 weeks. You signed that money over 2 weeks ago. You can't take it back now, can you? That's what irrevocable means. That's why she chose that moment. She didn't confess out of guilt. She didn't slip. She'd been waiting 34 years for the exact day when the truth would cost her nothing, and she believed that Sunday was that day. I didn't scream. I didn't break anything. I grabbed my keys and drove I-80 for 2 hours, past the industrial parks and refineries I'd worked in when I was 25. I came home at 11 that night and slept in the guest room. And then I did the only thing a man can do in that situation. I found out for myself. There's a lab in a strip mall in Naperville, between a nail salon and a shipping store. Legal paternity testing. Walk-ins welcome. I sat in that waiting room on a Tuesday morning at 9 o'clock with a clipboard. And I need to tell you what that feels like. I'm 62 years old. I've built structures that will outlive me, and I sat in a molded plastic chair, filling out paperwork, writing my own children's moms under alleged child, while a receptionist young enough to be my granddaughter kept her voice extra gentle, because she knows what a broken man looks like. She sees them every day. I tested all 3. For my oldest 2, I took toothbrushes from their homes after Sunday dinner. A legal gray area. I didn't care. For my youngest, I did it the honest way. I called her at school, told her I needed a favor I couldn't explain yet. She drove down from DeKalb and swabbed her own cheek in a parking lot, and she asked me exactly 0 questions. That's the difference between my children right there. I just didn't see it yet. 9 days. I want to talk about those 9 days, because nobody ever talks about the waiting. I went to work. I had a side job replacing a condenser unit at a church on the west side. I did that job with the same precision I've done every job for 40 years. And nobody watching me would have known anything was wrong. I had dinner with Andrea twice during those 9 days. She'd moved into the guest room. We were excessively polite. Neither of us mentioned the word test. Every night I lay in bed and did the same thing. I stared at the ceiling and mentally went through my children's faces, searching for myself, my son's hands, my daughter's laugh, which was my mother's laugh. I would have bet my life on it. My youngest's stubbornness, which everyone said came directly from my father. I found evidence of myself in all 3 of them. Every night, 9 nights straight. Then a woman I'd never met emailed me a PDF, 0 for 3. I read it in my truck. Probability of paternity, 0%. 3 times 3 separate reports, same 2 words at the bottom of each page. Excluded as the biological father. Now here's where I made the biggest mistake of my life, and I'm telling you this because it's the most painful part of this entire story. I decided that we were going to get through it together. I genuinely believed that. I sat in that truck and thought, they're still my kids. 34 years, 31 years, 20 years, whatever their mother did years ago has nothing to do with the boy I taught to drive stick in a parking lot. We'll sit down as a family. It'll be the hardest day of our lives, and then we'll heal. I called all three of them, asked them to come to the house Saturday, said it was important. Andrea was at her sister's place by then. I made coffee. I set the lab reports face down on the table. I had a speech prepared. I was going to tell them that it changed nothing. They arrived, my son first, my daughter behind him, my youngest the last, still in her car clothes with a duffel bag from school. I started talking. 4 words in, my voice cracked. That never happens to me, but I got through it. I told them about the test, told them the results, told them I was sorry they were finding out this way, told them I loved them, told them nothing between us would ever change. And my son said, "Dad, come on." I looked at him. We know. He had his phone in his hand. He never put it down. We've known since 2019. The room didn't move. I didn't breathe. My daughter said, "Blake, what?" "He's got the papers right there, Dana." My son shrugged. Actually shrugged. I did one of those DNA ancestry kits after graduation. Everyone was doing them. Nothing lined up on your side. I asked Mom about it. She told me everything. 29. So, Dad, and this is the part I'll never forget. He said it like I was being unreasonable, like I'd brought up something inappropriate at a dinner party. It's not, nobody was trying to hurt you. It just wasn't a thing that needed to be a whole big deal. You're our dad. What difference does it make? My daughter was looking at her phone. I said, Dana, I found out in 2020, she said to the table. Blake told me. Neither one of you said anything. I asked, what were we supposed to say? My son's voice rose. He was getting irritated with me. Walk in and blow up your whole life? Mom asked us not to. We were protecting you. 6 years. 6 years of Thanksgiving dinners. 6 years of phone calls about trucks he was thinking of buying. 6 years of Father's Day texts. 6 years of me building something for the 3 of them. And every single time I called him son, he knew, and he was managing me. The feeling that went through me at that table wasn't rage. It was something worse, something quieter. It was the dawning realization that I was the only person in that room grieving. For them, this was old news, 6-year-old information that had resurfaced. For me, it was brand new. It was happening right then. I had walked in there, prepared to hold my family together through the worst news of their lives. Instead, I discovered I was the last one to know. I was the only one it was happening to. Then I looked at my youngest. She hadn't said a word. 20 years old, sitting on the edge of the couch, hands folded in her lap, face completely gray. She said, I didn't know. She turned to her brother. You knew. You were 14, Maya. I'm 20 now. It never came up. She stood up and walked out the front door. I heard her car start and drive away, and I sat there with 2 grown adults who were annoyed with me for making things awkward. Victoria Morgan has practiced estate litigation in Chicago for over 40 years. She read all 3 lab reports without changing her expression. Then she set her pen down. Mr. Ashford, I'm going to give you the honest version, not the version you want to hear. That's why I'm here. You want to sue your wife. In Illinois, that road is mostly closed. There's no clean standalone claim for what you're describing that will survive a motion to dismiss. Lawyers have tried for 30 years. She let that sink in. Then she tapped the trust document. This is different. An irrevocable trust is difficult to unwind, but not impossible. A trust can be invalidated if its creation was induced by fraud. Not a mistake, not a misunderstanding. Fraud, a material fact known to be false, deliberately concealed, that you relied upon when you signed. I signed because they were my children. Yes, and critically, you signed 2 weeks before your wife told you they weren't, which means she knew, and she let you fund it anyway. She removed her glasses. Now, here's what matters. If only your wife knew. This is a difficult case. It takes years and you might lose. But if the beneficiaries themselves knew, the adult beneficiaries who accepted the money, that's an entirely different situation. My son told me he's known since 2019. She was quiet for a moment. Did he say that in front of witnesses? He said it in front of his sisters. Mr. Ashford, she said, then we're not going to make speeches. We're going to subpoena phone records. If you're still with me, type justice in the comments, because what came back in discovery is the part I still can't read twice. It took 4 months. Nobody testified, no dramatic courtroom confrontation. Instead, a records custodian at a telecommunications company produced 6 years of messages, and a paralegal assembled them into a binder with numbered tabs. October 2019. My son to my daughter. Did the test, he's not it. Mom confirmed, don't say anything. My daughter 3 days later. Are we telling him? My son. For what? So we lose everything. No. Then later that same night, the message they projected on a screen in that conference room. He'll never find out. Just let him sign whatever he wants to sign. There's a message from my wife to my daughter in 2022. Let him do his trust thing. It's the only thing he talks about. There's one from my son in January of last year, 2 months before I signed. Don't get weird around him this year. He's finalizing it in the spring. 211 pages total. Paper doesn't get emotional. Paper doesn't misremember. Paper just sits there and tells the truth. Victoria never had to argue anything. She simply placed the binder on the table. The settlement conference lasted 90 minutes. I sat on one side with my attorney. My wife and 2 oldest children sat on the other with their lawyer. About 40 minutes in, their attorney requested a recess and took his clients into the hallway. When they came back, my daughter had been crying. My son wouldn't look at anyone. The trust was unwound. Not by a judge, not by a verdict, not by dramatic speeches. It was unwound because their own attorney explained what a Cook County jury would do with 211 pages of evidence showing a man's children conspiring to keep him quiet while he signed away his life's work. $6.2 million came back. The entire process took less time than a Cubs game. The divorce went approximately as Victoria predicted. Illinois is an equitable distribution state, but fault matters. And 34 years of concealed infidelity, documented in your own children's text messages, is about as much fault as you can carry into a courtroom. My wife's attorney advised her to settle. She did. She's in a 2-bedroom apartment in Schaumburg now. Her sister in Indianapolis stopped speaking to her after everything came out. I saw her once, about a year later, a grocery store in Oak Brook. We stood in the produce section like 2 strangers who vaguely recognized each other. I asked her the only question I had left. Why she never told me. Not in 96, not in 2005. Not ever. She said, because you would have left. I said, Andrea, I would never have left those children. She looked at me and said, you wouldn't have left them. That's the closest that woman ever came to telling me the truth. 34 years. She kept the secret because she knew I wouldn't have walked away from the kids. I would have walked away from her. She said, take care of yourself, Nate, and pushed her cart away. That was the last conversation I ever had with my wife of 34 years. The biological father surfaced about 5 months later. His name is Raymond Mills. He's 66. He was a friend from the old neighborhood, used to come to our cookouts. Understand this. This man ate at my table. He held my daughter when she was a baby. He and my wife had an affair that ran on and off from 1989 to 1990, which covers the conception of all 3 of my children. I never confronted him. I have nothing to say to Raymond Mills, but my oldest 2 went to see him. I know because my youngest told me. He lives in a subsidized apartment in Joliet. He has emphysema, uses a walker, and drives a 14-year-old Buick. When 2 grown children showed up at his door wanting to know who they were, he was polite for about 20 minutes. Then, according to my daughter, he asked if there was any money in it for him. That's the man. That's what my wife threw everything away for. 34 years, and the answer is a sick old man in Joliet asking if there's anything in it for him. My youngest took her own test. She didn't tell me she was doing it. She drove herself to a lab near campus. 9 days later, she showed up at my house on a Sunday with the envelope unopened in her lap. She wanted to open it together. I told her she didn't have to do that. She said, "I know I don't." Same 2 words. Excluded as the biological father. She read it, set it down, was quiet for a minute. Then she said, "I don't care who he is. I know who my father is." Then she got angry. Not at the paperwork, at everyone else. Blake knew when I was 14, she said. "Do you know what I did when I was 14? I made you that ugly clay pencil holder for Father's Day. You still have it on your desk." She was crying by then. "He let me do that, knowing." She cut her mother off that spring. No big confrontation. She just stopped responding. My wife called, texted, had my daughter call, showed up at her dorm once. My youngest refused to come downstairs. I need to tell you what that girl actually did during those months. Because saying she stuck by me doesn't capture it. She drove home from school almost every other weekend that entire semester. An hour each way in a used Corolla with 140,000 miles on it. She'd show up Friday night. She never made me talk about it. She'd just be there. She put a game on TV. One Saturday, she found me sitting in the workshop at 11 in the morning, just sitting on a bucket, staring at nothing. She pulled up another bucket and sat next to me. And for 40 minutes without saying a word. Then she said, "You want a sandwich?" Her grade slipped that spring. She had a 3.8 and it dropped to a 3.1. I found out from a professor's email she left open on the counter. When I asked about it, she told me it wasn't my business and to drop it. 20 years old. It cost her something real. She cut off her mother at 20. And there are nights I know she struggles with that. Because a daughter is supposed to have a mother, and now she doesn't. I told her once, about a year in, that she could talk to her mother if she wanted, that it wouldn't hurt me. She said, "That's not why I'm not talking to her, Daddy." I never brought it up again. My son came back in the spring. He called and asked to get lunch. We met at a restaurant in the West Loop. He showed up with a folder. That's what I want you to understand. My son came to reconcile carrying a business proposal. He wanted to start a logistics company. Brokerage. He had projections. And his pitch, the actual pitch he made to me across the table, was that the family should move past this, and that the smartest investment I could make at my age was backing someone who understood the industry. Not once did he apologize for the 6 years. He said he was sorry about how everything came out. That's not the same thing. That's an apology for the discovery process. I let him finish. I've learned to let people finish. Then I said, "Blake, do you remember the parking lot at the old mall?" He said, "What?" "You were 16. I taught you to drive stick out there. You stalled that truck 30 times. You got so frustrated you started crying. And you wouldn't let me see it, so you got out and stood behind the truck for a minute." He said nothing. "I think about that a lot," I said. "That was real. That happened. Nobody can take that from me." I put my credit card down for the check. "But you sat at my table for 6 years and managed me. And when I finally told you, you were annoyed. Not sorry. Annoyed." I said, "I'm not investing in your company." And I left. I sat in my truck in that parking lot for 15 minutes before I could drive. My daughter came in the summer. She cried. I believe the tears were real. I still said no. She lied. "You were the only father I ever had." I said, "I know. That's what makes it what it is." Because here's what nobody wants to hear. It would have cost them nothing to tell me. One sentence 6 years ago. "Dad, we need to talk." I would have cried. Then I would have made breakfast the next morning, and every single one of them would still have their inheritance today. They didn't hide it because it was too painful to say. They hid it because saying it might cost them money. That's in their own words. On page 71, that's what I couldn't get past. Not the DNA, the calculation. Here's where things stand now. I bought a smaller place outside Naperville. 4 bedrooms, 3 more than I need. But I wanted room for people. I have a workshop out back. I take the occasional side job for guys I came up with. mostly to have somewhere to be. I put $2 million into a scholarship fund through the union HIT. Apprentice pipe fitters, first-year tools and union dues covered. 12 kids a year. I did it because when I was 19, my father couldn't afford to buy me tools. A man I barely knew loaned me his. I never forgot that kindness. There are 12 19-year-olds in Chicago right now with the brand new toolboxes, and none of it has anything to do with whose blood runs through their veins. My youngest graduated in May. Healthcare administration. She works at a hospital system in the city. She is, by a wide margin, the most decent human being I have ever known. She fought me over her tuition. Actually fought me. She had loans in her name from before all this happened. When I offered to pay them off, she refused, said she didn't want anyone ever saying she stayed for the money. I paid them off anyway, told her afterward. She was furious for 2 days. She calls me every Sunday. She comes out to the house twice a month. She cooks dinner. It's usually terrible. I eat every bite. And here's the last thing. The thing I've never said out loud to anyone. 3 months ago, I signed a new will. It leaves almost everything to my youngest. The house, the remaining sale proceeds. Everything except the scholarship endowment and a portion to the union's widow's fund. She doesn't know. She won't know until after I'm gone. She'll hear it from a lawyer in a conference room someday when I'm not there to see her reaction. And she'll be angry. She'll probably say she never wanted it. And she'll mean it. That's exactly why she deserves it. I gave $6.2 million to 3 people who knew the truth about me and chose to stay silent. I'm giving what's left to the one who learned the same truth and drove 2 hours to sit at my table and tell me it didn't matter. People tell me I didn't lose my children. They mean well. They're wrong. I had 3 children. 2 of them made a decision about me in 2019 and never said a word. The third made a different decision in about 4 seconds, out loud, in front of me. Blood didn't make that choice. They did. So if you take one lesson from an old pipe fitter who discovered at 62 that his entire life was built on a lie, let it be this. Watch what people do when telling you the truth would cost them something. That's the only test that matters. Everything else is just paperwork. So let me ask you the question I have been carrying. If you were sitting in my chair, would you have written that check for your son? Or would you have done what I did? Tell me in the comments. And tell me where you're watching from. If this story hit you somewhere, hit that like button and subscribe, because I've got more coming, and I'll see you on the next one.